did it. So I called and said, isotopes? No, we didn't do any isotopes tests at all.
Although Los Alamos was supposed to do this isotopic ratio abundance test, they denied that they did.
So were you getting the feeling that all these scientists that were doing the analysis were lying to you?
Absolutely lying to me.
We have a piece that may have fallen off of a UFO. We know that it affected a wall safe and caused it to malfunction 3 nights in a row. And although there have been multiple labs and analysts that have looked at this object, Bob claims that they're scared to talk about it after their tests. But we've contacted 2 scientists who are brave enough to talk to us and analyze the Bob White object.
My initial impression of the object was that it was extremely extraordinary. It was something like which I'd never seen before.
Chris Ellis is a solid-state physicist with an expertise focusing on aluminum alloys and semiconductors.
After poring over the data, we found that the object is an aluminum alloy of unknown origin. This is not anything like we've seen before. There are some very unusual metals in this object that you typically do not find in other alloys.
What's the chance that these elements would end up in this alloy either naturally or accidentally?
I'd have to say pretty much zero.
So this is absolutely a manufactured object.
Looking at a detailed list of all the metals and all the elements that can be found in this object, it's conclusive that they're there by purpose.
This looks like a manufactured piece created by some form of intelligence. Now, could it be made by us, or could it have been made by an extraterrestrial?
We're looking at something much more advanced than what we're currently familiar with today.
We are in Kimberling City, Missouri, investigating the Bob White story. In 1985, after seeing multiple UFOs, an object is either ejected or shot down towards the ground. Through scrupulous scientific analysis, no one can say what this piece actually is. We are now sitting down with 2 scientists who are brave enough to come out and speak to us. And even though the institutions they're affiliated with requested to remain anonymous, we are uncovering new clues that are being discovered about Bob White's object.
I did 2 types of tests. The first test I did was X-ray diffraction analysis.
David Lamb is a research scientist currently at a major university in the U.S. His expertise is in physics and material science, and he spent the past year researching the Bob White object.
What's very unique about this is we have what's called an amorphous peak here. And that amorphous peak tells me that this is a polycrystalline semiconductor.
What's the significance of that? I mean, how anomalous is that?
You don't find that in aircraft aluminum.
Where do you find it?
I'm not aware you find it anywhere. Another thing that's very unusual in this is it has silver in it, and a very high percentage of silver, about 4.3% silver. Silver is only used in aluminum at the experimental stage of superconductivity. If you spray the surface of aluminum with silver, then you enhance superconductivity.
Superconductivity is a phenomenon in some metals that occurs at very low temperatures, resulting in absolutely zero electrical resistance and excludes the interior magnetic field. This means that an electric current introduced to the superconductor can flow and persist freely and indefinitely without any added power source.
Let's say you fire a bullet through a magnetic field, well, it's going to have experienced drag. But what if that bullet was able to superconduct? It would expel the magnetic field, and that bullet would not slow down. It would not experience any kind of drag. So, if this was something traveling through space and it was going through, let's say, Jupiter's powerful magnetic field, it could theoretically expel that magnetic field and zip past Jupiter without experiencing those forces.
Now, with superconductivity, is that difficult to achieve?
Space is the perfect environment for superconductivity. You have to expend no energy to get objects to be superconductive in space.
So if an object were fabricated to travel in space on its own, this would be the kind of object it would be.
Yes. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck out of the native properties of this object in space.
It's a perfect fit.
Let's put the pieces together. Bob White's object reminds me of other cases we've investigated in the past. Maury Island, where a witness said metal objects were ejected from a UFO.
I took a little sample from the serrated edge of this aluminum piece. Most of the material you can identify. You know, it's the question of whether it's anomalous or whether it's normal.
Aurora, Texas, where Brawley Oates gave us an unknown aluminum alloy discovered at a mysterious crash site.
Right away we could tell this was aluminum. That's the highest peak.
What's that one, that larger peak? Could we have picked up contaminants from the soil?
Even if we did, it should correspond to some element that we could match here.
That's interesting. Maybe we discovered a brand new element.
What do all these things have in common? These objects have unique qualities that might point to an extraterrestrial origin.
So we've had 3 trace evidence cases that we've looked at, and each time I get excited that we're going to come up with some kind of evidence that proves what we're dealing with is not of this earth. But every time, I'm disappointed.
I think the evidence is absolutely overwhelming, going all the way back to the 1930s, running right through for 70 years. There's a collection of trace evidence that is astounding. The problem is absolutely proving without a shadow of a doubt that trace evidence is causally connected to the high strangeness that people experience. I think the wall between what we have now and where we want to be for absolute proof is tissue paper thin. We must keep going. The answer is on the other side of that wall.
We've investigated Bucks County and heard amazing testimony. And we corroborated the stories of eyewitnesses to an amazing craft. Although we had no idea what to think of these sparkles that Denise Murder described, I think we've shown with a preponderance of evidence what these UFOs are up to. After hearing the cases in Poland of this vitrified soil possibly connected to these unidentified holes, we think they might be testing us. But for what reason, we don't know. Then we hear the story of Bob White and actually hold the object in our hands. And we read the reports from top-level institutions that can't identify it. It's fantastic. And as time passes, further scientific testing may one day prove that it's of extraterrestrial origin. I'm not alone in thinking that trace evidence may be the key to discovering what's behind these UFOs. It's just a matter of time before we discover that smoking gun that will blow this secret wide open.
Let's go.
We just received a phone call from David Lamb. After conducting additional scientific testing, he now theorizes that Bob White's object is a quasi-crystal of a very complex structure. This type of structure is considered to be the cutting edge of nanotechnology. It didn't exist in 1985, and even today, it's in its early stages of development. I believe, as science and technology progress, it will one day be possible to properly identify the nature of Bob White's object and prove once and for all it's extraterrestrial.